Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is the Speed Chess Championship Grand Final. Can I just say, every year, and I'm a little disappointed because we only got one in 2025/2026, so one over 2 years. The Speed Chess Championship is the best event on the calendar. It is just so exciting. It's an incredible format, and it is a big advocate for why classical chess is dying, because people want to watch blitz and bullet. Now, with that said, I just finished watching the grand final. We had the third place match between Denis Lazavik and Hikaru Nakamura. We will start there as a little appetizer before we get to Magnus Carlsen versus Alireza Firouzja in an incredible matchup. But first, Hikaru Nakamura and Denis Lazavik. Now, this is the final game that they played, and there's an interesting story about it. That's why I start with it. Going into this game, Hikaru Nakamura is 1 point behind Denis Lazavik. This is the final game they started before the match clock expired. Now, there's a very interesting story, and so we will get to that interesting story in just a moment. But for reference, Hikaru Nakamura had not lost like 5 games in a row against Denis, so he had momentum. Denis has the white pieces, played c4, e5. Look, we're not going to analyze it a lot. It was a bullet game. So, they pre-moved a bunch of theory. They've gained time by this point, by move 9, by move 10. They knew what they were doing. Sorry if the piece animations are a bit slow. My laptop's probably like, it's very late, you should be asleep. That's its own problem. And what happens is Hikaru gets a completely winning position in some time. We're going to skip forward because there's a blunder here. Queen takes d6 by Denis. A few moves later means Hikaru Nakamura is winning. And he follows it up with queen takes e4 check, f3, queen c2 check, and here queen f2 check. Sacrifices the queen to be completely winning. King takes f2 and knight e4 to get the queen all the way back. Completely winning by Hikaru Nakamura. But what happens is very fascinating. He allows his rooks to get forked. You will notice here, for a moment, both rooks were hanging. This is a nice move because now if you take my rook, I take your rook. And then if you take here, you lose. So you can't just liquidate pieces. So we get the rook out the way, and so on. e4, bishop to c5. Here, Hikaru Nakamura is completely winning. But he looks at the match clock, and it is about to expire. At some point, it is getting very close to expiring, and so he goes for something that is not the best plan. The best plan in this position is to play something like rook to c8 or g5. I mean, you can even play h5 in this position. Now, what he goes for is rook d2 check. He allows f takes e4, and there's h5. But that simply allows knight f3. And why this is important is because after rook dc2, there is check, king here, and check. And it is all over. Hikaru Nakamura, the 5-time SEC champion, is resigned to 4th place. It is 3rd place for Denis Lazavik. Why? Because it is simply perpetual check. The king will go up and down, and the knight will give checks. And it's funny because Hikaru Nakamura, and he sent a tweet about this, he holds his hands up. He just completely forgot about the format. He thought the game ended when the match clock expired, or like the game wouldn't count. Had he won this game, had he played the correct move, and just not had a brain fade, he would have taken the match to overtime, just like he did against Alireza Firouzja. Although I think there it was flipped in terms of the situation. So, a completely unexpected way to start the day. But now we go to Magnus Carlsen versus Alireza Firouzja. Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces. And we got a lot of this, like Boga Indian / Nimsa Indian kind of structures. Alireza played d4 throughout the whole match. Magnus mixed it up at times. And what happens here, the reason I'm showing this game, is because Magnus Carlsen took an early lead. A very early lead. He won the first game. Alireza then would go on to be a point up. But by the end of this game, Magnus Carlsen had won 3 games in a row. He sacks the queen. He did this a few times. And look at this, by the way. Brilliant pawn. When was the last time you saw a brilliant move? Because it's a pawn capture as a brilliant move. But the idea is check. The thing is, right, you can take the bishop, but you can't really, because if you take the bishop, there's like rook e1, and you die. So you have to like play queen takes e1, bishop takes e1, and try and defend this with like king here. And even here it's mate in 2 because there's check. So you really do suffer. So e takes d5. So Alireza has to go for this, but Magnus Carlsen here is just much better. Bishop d3. You can see it's much better. It's not mate 1. We get this position, and it's a queen versus 2 bishops and a rook. That's never enough material, and Magnus Carlsen won. And why this was important is because he went on to be 5.5, 3.5 up. 5.5, 3.5 up. He gained a 2-point advantage from the 5+1. Now, the match doesn't end there, obviously. But this is very important because going into the 3+1, Alireza had to strike back. And he did kind of. They made 2 draws to kind of end the streak, and then Magnus lost. So Alireza pulled the point back. They then drew again before Magnus won. And that was the inherent problem, is that every time Alireza would get close, Magnus would just strike back. And nothing typifies this more, I think, than some of the latter bullet games. For example, I believe it was this one. Magnus Carlsen, you can see he wins on time, but that's because Alireza lets him flag. Alireza's got the white pieces. He plays d4. He played this a lot. We've got a Bogle Indian. Magnus played this several times. And what happens is we get this interesting structure. And Magnus Carlsen had the ascendancy early on. This is now in the bullet section. At this point, Firouzja is down 3 points. He's not panicking yet. He still has time left to try and catch this up. He plays king f1. But he gets rocked with a knight sacrifice. Okay? And then the pawn comes in, takes with check, and then the rook comes in. And he was rocked, and he was under pressure early on. And this all happened. And Magnus Carlsen seems to just be completely winning. He was going to be up 4 points. He was going to be up 3 points at the time. He was up 2 when this game was being played. But that's not how things transpired, because all of a sudden, Alireza's king got in. And the advantage with 4 seconds is not much. And in fact, Alireza was equal. And after king b7, which is an accuracy, king e7, he was better. King takes a5, b5 was wrong. And now he's winning. Now he's completely winning. He turned it around. Unfortunately, he played king a6. And then here everything just fell apart because he played knight e5. We had the bishop go to b2, knight f3, rook to c1, g5, and here he hung the bishop. Unfortunately, that happened a fair few times in the bullet. We will look at the final game, the game that crowned Magnus Carlsen, if you haven't figured out by now, the reigning speeches champion. 14.5, 11.5, this was their final game. And it was really heartbreaking because Alireza Firouzja had to win this. He had to win this to get close to overtime. He'd just beaten Magnus Carlsen. It took 4 minutes, but he had just beaten him. In an endgame, they got this structure, which was one of the more unique structures. They didn't have this a lot in the match. This is why I'm showing you. And he created a chance. You can see he was doing everything right. He had a dynamic game, and this was the problem. A couple of times, particularly in the bullet section. 3+1, they traded a couple of wins, but they were quite solid. They made a fair few draws. And so that was equal, 4.5, 4.5. So Alireza was left to catch up 2 points in the bullet. And it just didn't happen. We traded into this, and Magnus knew what he was doing trading into this. It was going to take a monumental effort for Alireza to win this. And of course, it's bullet. You know, the clock is ticking with every move. Yes, they have 1 second increment, but that's not always a lot. So you're losing time. But Magnus Carlsen blundered bishop e8, and Alireza Firouzja was better. and we had takes, and Magnus Carlsen blundered here tactically. And you can see Alireza is completely winning. He has to find the right move. Rook c7. Sorry? Rook c7, it was completely winning for Alireza Firouzja. Unfortunately, he went for rook c2, counterattacking the bishop, and now it allowed a liquidation of sorts for Magnus Carlsen. And bishop c4 was the end of the game, simply because there was g takes f4, g5, king e5. And Magnus Carlsen won. There's nothing you can do. He's just got 2 clean pawns. And so Magnus Carlsen is a 5-time SCC champion. He ties Hikaru Nakamura's record. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over. It is insane how Magnus Carlsen continues to do this. And also, I can't believe I've gone 11 minutes and haven't said it. With a mustache. Just a thick stash. Looks great. Looks interesting. But just a thick stash. Just rocked up with a thick stash and dominated this. His name goes on the Daniel Naroditsky Cup. Speaking of Daniel Naroditsky, of course, just a comment, something very nice. They had a chair there, custom made. It was sitting there at the commentary desk. Also, well done to the commentators, Gotham Chess and David Howell. Fantastic bit of commentary for the final. It was amazing. London crowd was amazing. Absolutely amazing event. How many times can I say amazing? They left a chair open for Daniel, and that chair will be auctioned off. All money will be going to the Daniel Naroditsky Memorial Fund to sponsor future events. The SEC is fun. It is over. And now we've got news. Alireza Firouzja has qualified to the Esports World Cup, and so has Denis Lazavik after he defeated Hikaru Nakamura by a single point. You can see he was down after the 5+1. He came back in the 3+1. Hikaru did win the 1+1, but it was not enough, and we had drama right at the end. But that is all I have to say, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you again soon.